The opinions you hear on Your Mountain from individual hosts or guests do not necessarily represent those of Your Mountain, our sponsors, or other entities we're affiliated with professionally or otherwise. You've waited long enough. Go listen to the show.
There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is Your Mountain. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the first episode of 2021 for the Your Mountain podcast.
You know what's awesome about this year?
It's not 2020.
That's exactly what's awesome. This is going to be the best year since 2020.
That's like a dad joke.
Well,
yeah, that is a dad joke. In all seriousness, welcome to 2021, everybody. Thanks for being with us, as always. So I'm your host, David Wilms. You heard Nephi Cole chime in with the dad joke. Mike McGrady, once he's done with his yawn.
I didn't yawn, I swear.
It is getting kind of late.
Yeah.
But we are in 2021. We were just, before we started recording this, we were, in some ways, I'd say reminiscing a little bit. We've been doing this now for 2.5 years, a little more than that now. And we're talking about where we've been, but we're also talking about where we're going. And 2021, we're hoping is going to be a big year for all of you. We're hoping it's going to be a great year for all of you. It's going to be better than 2020 for everybody. We also are hoping that you'll stick with us through 2021 because we're going to try and make this the best year yet for the Your Mountain podcast. And so that, with that in mind, what we wanted to do today, rather than diving deep into a topic to start out the year, we're going to share a little bit about, maybe our 2020 hunting season, a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. But we're going to talk also about where we're going in 2021, the types of topics that we're going to cover on the Your Mountain podcast this year. We've been brainstorming some ideas. I think we've got some good ones lined up. And obviously, we'd love to hear from you all as well. What other topics do you want to listen to? Do you want us to cover? But we're, the last couple of months, I think we got pretty heavy on the politics side, and it tends to happen going into an election like we did. We're going to back off a little bit. We're going to do a lot more very hunting specific related policy topics, getting kind of back to our roots, the kind of stuff I think we're pretty good at, right? And we're going to do that. We'll have to talk because we're changing administrations and philosophies. We're going to have to talk about what that change means and things that happen during that change and how those decisions affect each and every one of us and the way we use our public lands, the way we hunt, the way we fish, all that stuff. So
you know what I'd like to do in honor of 2020?
What's that?
I'd like to come up with crazy theories that potentially could happen, but then I'd like to not ever come up with any proof. I'd like you to have to prove that it didn't happen in honor of 2020. That's what I'd like to do.
Isn't there enough of that going on right now?
There's a lot, so maybe we don't do that. But I will throw one out there for you, this is in honor of let's put 2020. Let's dig a big hole. Let's shoot, shovel, and shut up on 2020. Let's just roll it in.
Never talk about it again.
And we're just going to cover it because there's no statute of limitations on 2020.
But you say
so
that.
I just want to move it. I just want to be done with it.
I know you want to be done with it.
Yeah.
But there were some good things that happened in 2020. Like, I had a phenomenal hunting season in 2020. I don't want to have to bury that and not remember that. It was a
good year.
It was a fantastic hunting year for me. Do I have to forget that?
No.
Okay.
Well,
as long as I don't have to bury that with everything else.
Maybe we can just selectively remember the good things about 2020.
I think that's a good way to do it.
That's probably a good thing to do.
I had some good experiences in 2020.
Yeah, me too.
Spent a lot of time in the backcountry with my daughter. Backpacked all over the place in multiple states. Covered hundreds of miles backcountry. Had great hunting season. I mean, there were some good things that happened. There were some real bad things that happened too, but there were some good things that happened.
You know what's funny? and maybe this is just because I honestly do kind of feel like I'm a glass half full kind of guy. Like I can't remember any bad things from the outdoor space. Like any outdoor, like when I'm trying to think about things in terms of, things that.
I'll give you one.
What?
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, from my perspective of bad news, it might be good news to others.
Uh-huh.
From my perspective of bad news, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reinstated the listing rule for grizzly bears. So grizzly bears in the greater Yellowstone area remain on, or upheld the district court decision, I should say, but they remain on the endangered species list, threatened as a threatened species.
So you're a pessimist.
So on the outdoor space, I remember choking on a lot of smoke this summer.
Oh yeah,
There
Big fires
were
in
some
my favorite
massive
playgrounds.
you're a pessimist
fires.
too.
No, I didn't say.
I was thinking about forest regeneration. What a wonderful thing that was going to be for elk
Yeah.
hunting this year.
I had tremendous memories. I'm glad I was able to camp and fish in those spots before they burned.
Yeah,
They're going to be
there
so
were-
good to elk hunting this year.
Almost every place I went backpacking this summer, almost every place burned after I went there, and I swear it wasn't my
wasn't you.
campfire.
Do you know how to put a fire
I
out?
do know how to
Can
put
you
a fire
imagine
out.
how good the hunting is going to be next year?
I can, and I can speak from experience, because if for those of you that have listened to this podcast for years, you'll remember we talked about
Your
my
mountain.
mountain and how it burned, and since it's burned, I've killed 2 pretty nice bull elk on it. Well, 1.5, but I had multiple bullets in that one that
You share.
and I share with a friend that also put some bullets in that elk as well. But 2 elk in that spot, and elk, just seeing elk like crazy. So
This year.
this year, my
Yeah.
goodness, there were so many elk. It was unreal.
And I
Lots of
had a
elk.
real tough elk finding year until I found them. Then I had a good elk year this year.
That's how it usually works,
Yeah.
right? That's how my cow hunt was. Can I tell my cow hunt story before we get into
How
talking
long is it going
about
to take?
just a couple minutes?
Yeah,
You
I
have
think
2
you'll.
minutes.
I think it's going to take a couple more than that. I'm sorry.
That's
you can
4.
you can interject at any time you want. But
Can I make stuff up about it in honor of 2020? Can I invent truth?
well, it depends on what.
Oh,
it
go
is.
ahead.
Depends on what it is. Okay, so December 28th, I think is when it was. December 28th. I had a late season cow tag. Mike, you had the same one. We'd gone up in November, and
Yeah.
we'd gotten onto a herd of a couple hundred elk, and we chased them all day long and just kept buggering it up, right? And just couldn't. We were in different locations, just couldn't quite seal the deal. I went up again a couple weeks after that, and with a couple other people, and not a track, not a sign that they'd been there. Like, it was just devoid of wildlife. There was nothing there. Then I got a call from a buddy that said, "Hey, let's give it one last run. Let's try one more time." One of our buddies that hadn't been able to get out much this year. And he said, "I'm going to do a day trip. You want to come along?" I'm like, "A day trip? All right, we'll do that." So it involved getting out of town about 3:45 in the morning to get up to the spot where we're going to hunt, to get there in time. And we roped in one other guy, so there were 3 of us going. And we were hunting on actually a game and fish. Well, it was private land. It was a hunter management area contract through the game and fish department, right? Huge hunter management area, walk-in only, no roads. So big walk-in only. And from the outside looking in, you'd say there can't possibly be. It just doesn't look like elk country, right?
It's flat.
It's not real flat. I mean, it's just 1,200 feet up, but it's really open, really, really open.
Yeah.
Lots of rolling terrain, deep canyons, but not a lot of cover.
I think I know where you were.
You probably
I should
do.
probably say it.
No, you probably shouldn't, but you probably do know where we were.
I know.
So we get up there December 28th, and the thermometer in the truck when we pull into the parking spot, -15. So it's brisk, to say the least. And we set off, and the way to get into this spot, it's like half a mile to 3/4 of a mile roughly across sagebrush flats before you even get to any of the topography. And then you got to climb up over this mountain, and then the stuff that you hunt is on the other side of this mountain. So it's a solid mile, maybe just over a mile before you get to anything you can hunt. The second we get into it, we cut tracks. There's 4 or 5 inches of fresh snow, and we cut really fresh tracks. We're like, oh, all right, no, this is a good sign. We know there's elk in here, right? And so my normal philosophy is I see tracks and there was hair in the tracks and stuff. I see tracks that fresh with hair in it. I'm following them to the animal.
Yeah.
Didn't do that. Saw the direction they were going and figured we could get around them a different way. So just dropped a different way and made an approach. And it wasn't, 40 minutes later when Buddy looks up the mountain. He's like, there they are. And we see one big herd grazing on a ridge intermixed with rocks. And then we look down the mountain from them into this draw, and there's another smaller herd of 15 or 20. And we just sit tight. So I don't know if I should say this. Here's what really happened.
All right.
They're all antsy to get going, and I hadn't had my morning constitutional.
How did you make it a mile back in, David?
I know, right? A mile back in, and I was fine until we saw the elk. I'm like, nope, got to happen right now. I'm like, guys, I will be right back. So I took off down the mountain a little ways to find some seclusion and a nice view, and then came back up. Anyway, then it was strategizing. So we watched these elk go over the ridge, and we waited, and we started working up towards them. And I'll cut through a lot of stuff. Basically, it's wide open country, and you can't just walk right at these animals. And we knew that this was the herd, and you had one chance to do it right, and that was your day. And we're there for a day trip, right? So we were going to take our time and do it right. So it took us, 2 hours, maybe a little more than 2 hours, until we finally got up into the elk, like where we knew they were. We knew there was a herd of 50 or 70, still a couple hundred vertical feet above us on the mountain. And we were working towards those, but we also knew there were elk over this ridge from us that we'd watched go over the ridge in the morning and bed down. And those are the ones we kind of had our sights set on. And like, as we were getting into where all the beds and sign and tracks were, we catch 2 grazing. Right? So I throw up the rangefinder, 274 yards. And of course, like, I'm super pumped. I'm like, let's do this. Well, we'd had a conversation beforehand with all of us about what's your comfortable range, like how far you're willing to shoot. And you tell me now,
good, and
we are not going to change that.
Cool.
Right? And so if there's anything outside of that, we're not taking that shot. And it was 250. Like 250 was the number. And these were at 274. And so it's like, okay. And the way we were going in on this is I'd already killed an elk. These 2 guys had never killed an elk in their lives. These were 2 guys that had never killed an elk before. I'd already killed an elk this season. So my objective was I'm letting them shoot first. And Mike knows that that's a really hard thing for me.
Yeah.
But I was holding to this, and we had this conversation. So I was doing the ranging, and I was trying to line people up to try and get them a shot. These 2 elk moved out of sight, 274 yards, okay, it wasn't going to work for them. We had to get closer. So we let them get out of sight, and we were working our way closer, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I'm leading like a line, right? So I'm in the front, and these 2 guys are right behind me. Corner of my eye, I see animals. I look, and I reach for my rangefinder. I'm like, I don't need that. These were inside 100 yards, and there were elk bedded down and a few grazing. And I give the hand signal of like drop. We just all drop to our bellies, like just flat, trying to get behind rocks and out of sight. And then it's trying to get ourselves in position to take a shot. So we're all spread out at this point, unfortunately, by like 10 yards. So I can't be behind them or anything like that. So I'm in a spot. I've got 6, 7 cow. We all have cow tags only, right? 6, 7 cows just broadside standing there grazing, inside of 100 yards. And I've got, I'm behind this rock. I'm all lined up. I can't shoot. I'm looking at my buddy below me. He clearly can't get lined up. And I keep doing these hand and eye signals, like trying to get him to crawl up to me to line up on this. I'm like eyes, I'm like animals and making
for everybody who's
you
listening.
shoot.
Dave's making he's gesticulating wildly with his hands here for you that didn't understand that.
Trying to make ears, eyes, guns.
Yeah,
I'm just like you here,
like
shoot.
And, junior high school cheerleader.
And then I see my other buddy just down from us, and he's like pack off, down ready. He's a former Marine, right? Like he's all ready to go. I see him lined up. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. He's going to shoot one. I'm still trying to get this other buddy up, and he's signaling me off, and I'm like, okay, he must have a shot. So I get myself in position, and I'm just waiting, like now playing the waiting game, just waiting to hear the shot. And once I hear the shot, then I'm going to shoot, right? That's my plan, is let them shoot, then I shoot. I wait, and I wait, and I wait. And then the wind, whatever wind there was, shifts just slightly, and the elk start to get up, and this 6 or 7 turns into 70. They're just like that, like they're just up everywhere, and they're just walking, not really spooked, but they know something slightly off, right? So they're walking, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and nobody's shooting, and the last 2 or 3 elk start walking through the clearing, and I'm waiting, and I wait until the last cow is about 10 yards from the tree, the only tree here. Like when it gets behind that tree, it's done, and we're done. Is the way I think about it. Like nobody is shooting. I'm gonna shoot. So at that point, I shoot, and I hit her hard. She took 4 or 5 steps, and I think I said, oh, I hit her to one buddy that came up next to me, the one that was the closest. I'm like, I hit her, and we see her go behind a tree, stop, and then fall over, right? And then that buddy points to my right. He's like, well, there are the elk. And those elk had gone, they'd done a little semicircle around us, and they were still only about 100 yards from us, but they'd moved 45 degrees if you were doing a circle around you. And they were all just clumped up, standing there, looking back at us. And I'm yelling at him like, well, then shoot one, like on this rock. And he lines up, and he leans on this rock, and the elk are all blobbed up, and they're starting to move. And I hit the cow call twice, and 2 cows at the back of this stop, turn. They're separated from the herd, turn, look back at us, totally broadside. And I'm standing behind him, watching him, and he shoots. And I'm like, I don't want to tell him this, but I think he missed like 3 feet low. Like I just saw this puff of snow underneath the cow. Then my other buddy, so all the elk blow out. The other buddy walks up, and I'm like, why didn't you shoot? I'm telling my our retired Marine friend, I'm like, why didn't you shoot? He's like, I did twice. And get this. So what happened, and I don't think you don't know this story yet, do you, Nephi?
No.
So what happened is he shoots the same gun as I do, an M77, 30-06 M77, right?
Yeah.
So he shoots, click. He takes the bullet out, looks at it, puts it back in, re-racks it, shoots again, click. There was a divot in the primer, like the firing pin hit the primer. Mm-hmm. And
I can tell you exactly what happened.
And I want to hear in just one. I want to know that in just 1 second. What I'd wanted him to do, I'm like, well, why'd you put the same bullet back in twice? Why didn't you try another one? It was, in the heat of the moment, you can't blame a person, right? You're just like, what's going on? It's all this chaos, and you're just frustrated, and you throw the bullet back in and shoot again. But he's like, I had it dead to rights. It was like 80 yards away, just grazing. It still had food hanging out of its mouth, grass out of its mouth. Didn't even know I was there. He's like, click, click. And so what I think happened is when he re-racked that round, that's when the elk knew something was amiss, and they started to wander off a little bit. And then he shot again. So we went off and tracked for 2 hours, this herd. Never got on him again, looking for any kind of sign, any kind of blood that maybe the first buddy that did shoot, that maybe he hit this elk. Couldn't find any sign anywhere. And I knew it was low, and I think he'd never shot an elk before, and he just got super excited and nervous and everything all at once, and it kind of all hit him all at once, and he just
Yep. Man.
Did what we all do.
Happens to
everybody. Everybody.
Yeah, everybody.
And so I know he's super bummed about it, but if he's listening, he shouldn't be bummed about it. The fact is, we did an awesome stock. We got onto a herd of about 100 elk inside of 100 yards, which is in that country is really hard to do.
We were not able to do that a month earlier.
No, we couldn't get within 300 yards of them a month earlier.
God, yeah.
350 yards.
How old's that? Yeah. How old's that gun? We won't use the manufacturer's name again. But how old's the gun?
So I don't know how old it is, but he did tell me it was given to him by his uncle, and I had looked at it. I would put it, looking at it, I would have guessed it was probably from sometime in the 1970s.
What was the temperature?
So the temperature, I told you when we parked, it was 15 below zero. When we shot, I'm guessing it was closer to 10, 15 above zero, but with a wind chill that probably had it still around 15 below.
So this is what I'm going to postulate out there. A lot of people think that not a lot of people know how to take their bolt apart.
And one other thing before you give this, to give more background on the gun. He did, with this same firearm, he did kill an antelope, earlier this season. We were out with him when he did it. He did go to the range before we went out. It was firing fine before we went out for the elk.
What temperature?
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, much warmer. It wasn't that. It wasn't that cold.
Right. When he went to the range. Yeah, it would have been way warmer.
When we were antelope hunting, it was...
Yeah.
Well, he went between then.
If you've got an older rifle and you've never taken the bolt apart and cleaned it, but you think it's a great idea to oil stuff, like especially if you're a military guy and you run M16s and things like that, and you think that guns need to be run wet, there's a really good chance that you've got some oil in your bolt. And so when it gets cold, it'll drag. It'll just slow it down, and so it won't hit the primer with as much force. And so that's why it's important. If you got a modern rifle that you know how to, it's really easy to do. Just open your bolt up every once in a while and just clean that thing off and don't oil it. You might be able to put a little bit of the right kind of grease in there, just a tiny bit, but don't oil it ever, because that's what happens when it gets super cold. Just like if you had a semi-automatic handgun, there's a lot of guys that'll have a gun that shoots great at the range, and then they take it out elk hunting, like a 1911 or something, and they think it's fantastic until it gets cold or dirty, and then suddenly the gun doesn't run. And the gun doesn't run because the gun is tight and because they've got too much lubrication on the gun. And in those really cold situations, it's best to have no lubrication on the gun.
I wouldn't have known that. That's interesting to know. And he doesn't know the answer. He was actually going to go out to the range, and I haven't followed it up. He was going to go out to the range and take that bullet, that same bullet, and another bullet, and he was going to test it out again.
What's interesting is, like, a lot of times, like, you can take those that
and
are
they'll
like
shoot
that,
again, right?
They'll shoot, like,
so,
because
but that'll confirm it's temperature related, right?
Or he'll just think it's a fluke, but that's why it's just firearms maintenance.
It's not
every once in a while.
Though. I mean, if he hit it twice.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah. Because how they work, right? It's just a matter of distance, right?
Right.
That dimple's got to be deep enough,
right?
To get to mix the two. But anyway, like, it's like if that, it's like they go like this.
Yeah.
So it's like, anyway, that would be my theory, and I bet that if you cleaned up that it'd be fantastic, because he didn't handle the ammo, right?
No.
What do you mean didn't
hand load?
Oh, no, it was factory.
No,
I actually asked him that. I said,
and a lot of people
factory or a
and
reload?
a lot of people think that if like factory ammo not functioning if it's hit with a primer that's with a firing pin that's actually moving at the right speed, like not going off, like nah.
Low, yeah.
No,
you know what's
not
also,
a center fire rifle.
Here's something also that's interesting. He called up his uncle afterwards and said, "Hey, have you ever had this problem?" And his uncle said, "Yeah, a couple of times."
Yeah,
like ever. But it makes you wonder: is it temperature, or could it possibly be firing pin problem?
Well, the other, I'm not saying this was the case, but if people shoot a bolt action rifle too, the other thing to note is if you get lazy and you're hiking or something like that, or when you're going to chamber the rifle, if your bolt is not all the way down, if you have your bolt kind of knocked like halfway up, that takes away because the first thing that'll happen when you pull the trigger, that bolt's going to try and you'll lose some of the momentum. Like it'll waste energy locking everything up. Like it just, you'll see it if you dry fire a gun and you leave the bolt halfway up. Dry fire, you'll see the bolt jump down.
Yeah, except if his is anything like mine, and mine's probably 20 years young or newer than his.
It's the same.
Mine's the early 90s vintage.
Yeah, but they're going to be the same.
But if that's the case, my safety,
I know what you're saying, but
wouldn't work.
There'll be a certain amount of slop that'll let it up, and that's the other thing. Just to remember, like before you go, get too excited, just make sure the bolt's locked down, and then it's just firearms maintenance. Just do it every once in a while. Take your bolt apart and check it for garbage, and especially if you buy, or gifted a gun from somebody or given a gun from somebody, look inside it and like check it, clean it. Legitimately, so you can make sure that it's going to function the way that it's supposed to.
I just feel so badly for him. Not just from this trip, but I think it was 2 years ago. This same guy, he never liked to carry around a loaded, a hot rifle. So he'd have his bullets in the magazine, but he wouldn't have one in the chamber when he was walking. And he had this happen a couple of years ago where he had an elk at 40 or 50 yards and he had to then rack around. And of course that spooked the elk. And so this time he carried one in, ready to roll. And then this happened to him. And
well, that's a good story.
I feel bad for him. At the same time, I felt less bad for him after we'd packed that elk out and looked back at what we'd come from. And it was, 1,200 feet back up in all this snow and everything. And by the time we got mine out, it was 3 p.m. And if we'd had to go back to get 1 or 2 more, we would have been there until 10 at night or something like that, or later, trying to get these things out in the cold and rocky and nasty stuff. I mean, you know where that was, Mike.
Well, good story. And thank you all for joining us on the Your Mountain podcast. And remember, no, this isn't.
No, that's not the end.
It.
No.
Oh,
but isn't that? I wanted to tell that story a little bit just because. Well,
his point was it didn't take 2 minutes.
I told him it wouldn't take 2 minutes.
You said 4.
40-ish.
That's okay.
All right, it was longer than it needed to be.
You know what else?
But it was.
Did you know?
But it was 2 guys that are still looking for their first elk, and
so many different things can happen.
That's just it.
Yeah.
It shows you how hard it is. I mean, elk hunting is hard, and everything has to go right. And one little thing can go wrong, like your gun not firing.
Yeah, right.
It's a good story. Yeah. Did you know how long Russian olives have been in the Americas?
No, I do not.
Russian olives were introduced in the early 1900s.
Why don't you explain what a Russian olive is?
Where are you going with this?
It's a tree.
Okay.
So Russian olive is a tree that's not indigenous. It's an invasive.
It's viewed as very beautiful, which is one of the reasons why people liked it. And
they
grow very quickly.
50 different wildlife species use it for food, including deer. But here's the interesting thing. So Russian olives, they're super invasive. You know why they were introduced? A lot of people think it was for erosion. It was actually because some people liked hunting Eurasian doves so much that in order to get Eurasian doves something to eat, they decided to introduce Russian olives as a food source. I just made all that up, but I want you to prove that I'm wrong. That's conspiracy of the day. There you go.
I don't even have to prove you're wrong. I just tell you how you're wrong, right?
It doesn't matter.
What do you mean it doesn't matter? It's in celebration of 2020. I made all.
I wanted to make up an entire story.
Yeah.
So
it's my conspiracy
How
theory.
much of it is made up?
I don't have to tell you. You have to figure it out. That's how these work.
Well, I can tell you.
Don't you understand?
So Russian olives are invasive. They aren't native.
Don't bother me with your facts right now. I don't want them.
Eurasian collared doves do like to roost at them.
That's right.
It is true. But Eurasian collared doves came from...
Because part of what I said... part of what I've said is true.
Kind of your home state.
Everything that I've said... Yeah. Because part of what I've said is true. Everything that I said, therefore, must be given credibility.
No,
right.
That's not how that works.
All right, well, let's move on. We'll have a new conspiracy theory next week.
Really? I don't know if I like this segment.
I'm probably bored with it after this.
We're going to go through all 13 fallacies. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. This is the truth. Here's what we're going to talk about in the coming year. We're going to have experts on. We're going to have people, and believe it or not, and I know you never thought you'd get tired of people saying "believe it or not," but it's 2021 now, not 2020. So so you can believe us. We're going to talk about these things. So we're going to talk about things like lifetime licenses.
Yeah.
Are they a good idea or not, Dave?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. Right. Well, we're going to highlight a story. So to give a shout out to our mutual friend Ryan Bronson, who's been on this show a number of times. He sent us a text message and sent us a link to this situation that's been developing in Arkansas around lifetime licenses. And I think what we want to do is explore that scenario, what's going on in Arkansas, explore some of the history of lifetime licenses, where they are in the state, in different states, because every state does it so differently, right? That's the part that amazed me as we started looking at this, is how every state does lifetime licenses so differently. So what are they? What are the benefits of them? What are the downfalls of them from an agency standpoint, from an individual standpoint?
Monetary, like sportsman dollar standpoint?
Right.
Yeah.
How do those interplay with Pittman Robertson funds coming back to the states? All those things are things that we want to explore when we talk about lifetime licenses. There are several dozen states that offer, not all of them, but we'll verify
a lot
the number.
Of states offer lifetime
but
licenses.
more states do than don't offer lifetime licenses.
But it's important to note that they're not all the same.
Very different, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about all that, right, when we dive into this. But lifetime licenses are different in every state. But the idea behind them is you buy a license for whatever it is: fishing, bird hunting, maybe it's deer, depending on the state, white-tailed deer. You buy that license, and if you leave the state, you can come back to that state and hunt using that lifetime license as though you'd never left. Or if you stay in the state, you just never have to worry about buying a fishing license.
That when you buy a lifetime license, the rules on that lifetime license will remain de facto in effect
for your lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hence the name.
So how long do you actually think we could spend an episode talking about this, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Are you sure?
Yes.
You know how you're sure?
I know how I know.
Because
I'm
we've
sure.
already recorded this episode, but we were forced to throw it away because Mike and I sounded normal, and for some reason, because we did it remotely, Dave sounded like a chipmunk.
This is the exact reason why we didn't have an episode released last week.
So we're sorry, everybody. Mike and I thought the episode was just fine.
Actually,
I didn't have a problem with it. Did you?
Actually, your voices sounded fine. When you tried to make my voice sound a little better, it made you guys sound like you were just completely drunk, just slurring your words, talking slow, to try and get my voice to not sound like.
Do you have any
chipmunk.
idea how long I spent working on because of your ego to try and make you sound good?
It wasn't an ego. It just sounded so bad. Nobody wanted to listen to that.
I did.
So we're gonna talk about that again. I know you did, but we're gonna talk about that again. What else have you got on the list?
How many minutes do you think I spent trying to convince you that it'd be fine to release it?
More than you should have.
Longer than the episode was.
Yeah.
Just trying to talk you off the cliff on the phone. It's like, Dave, it'll be okay.
But then when I actually said, Nephi, this isn't going to work, you're like, yeah, you're right. It'd be a bad idea.
So here's the other things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about CWD in elk.
Chronic wasting disease.
Chronic wasting disease in general,
Yeah.
but specifically because it was found in elk in western Wyoming.
Yeah, on the National Elk Refuge.
Which is a concern for some folks because there's a couple elk on there.
One or two. And there have been for,
how many
many
more
generations.
than one? How many elk am I underselling that by?
It varies year to year. I'd have to go look at the numbers.
So it's more than 10.
It's more than 10. It's more than 20. It's thousands of elk. It's literally
It's
thousands
tens of
elk.
thousands, isn't it?
No, it's not
No.
tens of thousands.
Oh.
It's like 7,000.
But it's
something like
thousands of elk
But it's
congregating
thousands
in a small space
Yes,
in
and
CWD.
It's worth saying that
Yeah.
that's not the only feed ground. And if we're doing something on this feed ground, we've got a lot more field ground. We have
Right.
more than one location. So
And-
there's
and remember,
7,000
we-
in this location.
Yeah, and remember we did do an episode on feed grounds.
We did.
And so, we might weave some of that back in, some of that conversation back in about where they are, because it's not just Wyoming. There are feed grounds in other states too, and sort of talking about that. But we'll kind of explore the nuances of that issue a little bit more and what that means for CWD. I think we also would like to talk about CWD more generally as well. We haven't touched on that much. We've had people ask us to, and we
Yes.
haven't yet. And
It's a challenging issue, Dave.
it is a challenging issue.
that's the truth.
It is. It's a very, very difficult issue, and we should spend some time exploring that, and we will. So what else you got?
We're going to talk about trespassing because I know you like it.
But
I mean, the
more
issue-
than just trespassing.
We're going to talk about specifically corner crossing.
That's right.
Corner
So
crossing.
corner crossing, which is the act of, if you imagine this, if you had, let's say,
checkerboard. Picture
checkerboard.
a checkerboard, and you're trying to cross from red to red.
Which you can do, but
without
the question
touching
is, can you do that without touching
squares.
the black squares?
Yeah.
And, well, that depends on what touching, like, I mean, we're just touching the surface, or does the air belong to the black squares too? And so all those weird questions that we would ask about the checkerboard come into play when we're actually talking about the real world too.
So we're going to talk about, in the context of that, we're going to talk about not just what the law is in different states, or in some cases the lack of law is, and what that means, what
lack of precedent.
And what it all means, or what the precedent might be.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also going to explore some of the practical realities, the on the ground realities and relationships, and all of the things you have to balance when you're talking about an issue like corner crossing.
Yeah.
And what are the potential ramifications of just saying, lining up 1,000 people to go out and just say, we're going to test this thing and start crossing. So we're going to,
Mike,
we'll talk about that.
Have you ever had to consider corner crossing?
I've thought about it several times.
Yeah. You ever done it?
No, not that I know of.
I haven't, but I will tell you a quick experience, to kind of prime the pump for corner crossing. So my previous life, I spent a lot of time doing GPS work, like in the, mid 2000s, right? Because that's my world. And so I was one of the first geeks to have a really good GPS with me out in the field. And before anybody actually had OnX maps, I had all of the land ownership because I worked, in this field. I had all the land ownership. I was able to download it all onto a Garmin GPS unit and be able to, walk in the field with that GPS unit. And it was, pretty good. But a GPS unit that you carry in your hands, right? It's only good. Like everybody will see that, they used to have a plus minus for how close you were to the actual spot, like say plus minus 20 or whatever for 20 feet. The reality is, it's really hard to get that good without a base station to get down to like the 3 or 4 foot level.
Well,
and a lot of
actually
us,
back then when you were doing it, I thought there
that
was some
wasn't the
regular
scrambled one.
Oh, you weren't on the
I've
scrambled.
done both.
Okay.
And so a lot. So
because back then, you might be within 100 feet.
Yeah, they used to scramble the signal in like 2004, and then they had
for defense reasons. Right?
Yes, and so we used to have these GPS units. They called them a plugger, and if you don't know what that is, that means you are not old school. Like, because I used to carry this thing around that was, literally the size of, it was way bigger than Mike's laptop over there. Like, thing was huge. So you carry the plugger around and it had an antenna on it, and it was super slow, and it was military. And the reason you carried it is because I did survey work, and so it basically de-scrambled the signal, and that's just why it took us so long to get the actual location, because it was de-scrambling the signal. But, nobody cares anyway, because who cares? To get it within, closer by 20 feet in the world I was working in, people weren't surveying at that level because it was, natural resource survey. It didn't have to be that specific, so that accurate. Anyway, so back to the story. So this was not using the plugger. This is after they were unscrambling the signal. You go up on a ridge, and maybe you've done this, and you're looking at the map, right? And you're like, oh, yeah, there's this place where I'm going to be able to cross from this area into this area, and it's not going to be corner crossing. What happens on the way there? What do you run into that's not on the map?
Fence.
A fence.
Yeah.
Because the fences on the ground don't actually match up with the actual land ownership that you're looking at on your map. And there are different reasons why that may be the case.
Sure. Fences have nothing to do with borders.
No, they have to do with convenience.
Right.
Yeah.
From the guy who built the fence.
Yeah.
And so you may or may not, as you're corner crossing, that's part of the problem. As you're getting to that corner, you're like, hey, here we are. Are you really on the place that you thought you were?
You might be 30 yards from the corner.
You might be. And you're likely, again, your GPS unit that you're carrying in your hand, even on your phone, it is not going to be... It's not a survey grade unit. It's going to be off. How much is it going to be off? Well, anywhere from, 2 yards to 20 yards, depending on how lucky you get, which satellites are coming in, what your elevation is, the weather, all sorts of different stuff is going to affect how accurate that unit actually is, unless you've got a massive base unit sitting in your pickup truck on a known location that's giving you another signal to make you more accurate. And most of us, when we're hunting, don't do that.
Yeah, but and we'll talk about this when we do the corner crossing, but there are corners that have survey pins in the ground, right?
There are.
And actually, there are a lot of corners that have that.
But there's still a question of whether you could cross at a survey pin.
Exactly, and we'll talk about that because
That
there's
makes
actually
it
some
such an interesting
there's
issue,
actually
'cause
some case law on that.
You look at it on a map and you're like, this ought to be easy. I'm going from this piece of public ground that I own to that piece of public ground that I own right over the corner. And you're like, well, in theory, that's great, except we don't actually know if that's where we're at. And so there's got to be some give and take
but
there.
But the point is, even if you do know,
you couldn't shrink yourself so thin enough to make a difference.
well now
under
you're
the theory of the law that we're going to get into.
under the theory of some law, but not all. So we're going to explore it all corners of it. Huh?
Okay.
I like it. License allocations.
Yeah. So this was one that I was talking about.
Yes.
Right? So I'm talking about I'm interested in having a discussion about license allocations, but on a couple of different levels. Right. So one is, okay, how do states do license allocations between residents and non-residents? Every state does it a little bit differently. I think it'd be kind of fun to go into a dive and say, here's how they do it, and here's why they do it that way. Because there's actually a lot of case law out there that's influenced how resident, non-resident tags are allocated in states. Right there. So a lot of these systems are tiered off of circuit court case law, federal circuit court case law. So I think that piece will be interesting. But the other part of license allocations that I'd like to talk about and explore are the idea of complementary licenses.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, and I'll use this state as an example, there are, for any number of reasons, the legislature may decide that a certain number of licenses should be given for at no cost to certain individuals, right? So, for example, here, our game and fish commissioners are given, now I'm going to get this wrong, 2 each, is it? No, it's 8 each. They might each of
Commissioner's tags.
Each commissioner has 8 licenses that they can give out, complimentary. I think we'll verify that, but a number of them, and they can give them out to. There are very few boundaries on who can be a recipient of those licenses, right? So there's that. There are also things like, in this state, we have one-shot antelope hunt and a women's antelope hunt, and there are license allocations for at least one of those, maybe both of those. I think both of those.
There are both now.
There are disabled veteran license allocations. Some states have youth allocations. There are landowner license allocations. That's the way states do landowner licenses might be different. It might be you can get a license to hunt on your own property, or you might be able to get a license to hunt on an entire unit. You might have to actually pay for that license. Maybe you don't. Maybe you can transfer that license to somebody else.
That's exactly what I wanted to touch on.
And so all of those are part of this system of allocations, license allocations, that I think are worth a pretty deep dive to see how these work and some of the controversies around them, and some of the benefits from them. I mean, there are good policy reasons for having some of these allocations. There are bad policy reasons for having some of these allocations, and then there's some in between, and it'd be worth exploring some of those. So that's something I'm interested in talking about as well when we talk about license allocations.
All right. Next question for Mike.
Yeah.
Are you ready for another? Just kidding. No
more conspiracies.
If Mike had a cabin, let's just assume that Mike has a cabin in an inholding in Grand Teton National Park. You have 100 acres. In fact, you have 200 acres in Grand Teton National Park.
Why not 640 acres?
Might as
Make
well
it a
be.
full section.
Yeah,
A full
right?
section.
I mean, why not?
Why can't you hunt there?
I can.
Let's talk about that. What happened?
Well, there was a recent 10th Circuit case upholding a district court opinion, reversing on a little component of it. But it's an interesting controversy on whether or not when the Grand Teton National Park was established, that enveloped those private lands to make it a federal jurisdiction rather than state jurisdiction on hunting.
Now, so if it was so that's the argument. The argument of the federal government is what?
Well, it changed over time. and there was a concession by the federal government that it was okay
to hunt there.
Mm-hmm.
So we can hunt at your place.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
But there was a lawsuit
Fist bump to Dave
from one challenge by an environmental group over that decision. So we need to get into more detail on it, though.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. That was in the 10th Circuit, the decision on in-holdings in specifically Grand Teton National Park. Does it have application to other parks?
It could. But it's an interesting property clause type case anyway, so it could have application in other ways by extrapolation.
All right. Can we hunt bears there yet? Dave?
No, we cannot. But that's not actually what I wanted to talk about on bears. But I'm glad you brought it up. You know what I want to talk about.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to discuss. So there was a very interesting case filed a number of years ago. Actually, there was a petition filed by the Center for Biological Diversity and a couple of other environmental groups asking the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to amend the recovery plans for grizzly bears. So recovery plans are things that are these, what they sound like, recovery plans for listed species. It's the roadmap to recover a species and try and get them delisted.
Something contemplated in the Endangered Species Act.
Right, exactly. And so there's been a recovery plan in place for grizzly bears for decades. Right? And it's been modified a couple of times, or maybe more than that. There was a petition received by the Fish and Wildlife Service asking to amend this recovery plan to include in recovery reintroduction of grizzly bears in a number of what these groups identified as suitable habitats for reintroduction, places like the San Juans in southwestern Colorado, and a couple of other places. And also encouraging connectivity among all of the reintroduced and established populations to create a large meta population in the lower 48 states.
Well, that seems like a nice idea.
Right? And so that turned into a lawsuit, and that's the lawsuit I want to talk about. So basically what became of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's some problems with that. Not that you want to talk about it, but with the whole concept. I think we'll probably talk about those in the episode.
That's what we'll do.
Do you want to talk about a primer at all for them, or just say
no? I think
it's not as simple as you'd think.
It's not as simple.
I think
as
it's a recent decision, and it'd be one.
We'll
that's
probably touch on it sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later. I don't know if it'll be within the window of appeal though, so we might kind of have a situation where they're appealing to the Ninth Circuit. So
and they may not even appeal.
Yeah,
it's unusual. I saw the press release from CBD on this, and it's unusual. Usually their press release is, "We are appealing this unrighteous decision," and their response here was, "We're talking about whether we're going to appeal this case."
If our guy Judge Christensen couldn't really hand it to us, then
I want to go with it.
So anyway, that'll probably be a sooner rather than later discussion.
Any other?
It's also worth talking about
topics you want to promise at this point?
I don't want to promise anything.
I'm not going to promise anything. These are just topics we want to talk about.
I promise that I'll be willing to listen to other ideas that people have and want to write in on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's one commitment I'll make. It's something I felt like we were starting to stray a little bit from this the past couple of months, and
I blame Facebook.
There's a tendency to do that as you get into election cycles.
No, I really do.
But
go ahead.
My commitment is really making sure that we're committed to exploring all different sides of these issues, so you as a listener understand the various perspectives and why they're there.
There's peril in that. You know what the peril is?
What's that?
The peril is if you're actually willing to explore both sides of an argument, why people say one thing and why people say another. Whenever you bring up, and this is the 2020 theme, right? Whenever you bring up what Party A believes to be true, Party B will immediately be super angry that you were willing to entertain Party A's idea, and so therefore you will be canceled. But Dave,
we're nonpartisan, man.
Yeah, but we can't get canceled. We cancel ourselves.
Yeah.
But then,
as long as we pay our bills,
anyway.
Yeah, right.
And then the exact same thing happens with Party B. So then, if you entertain Party B's idea, and you're like, "Hey, there may be something to Party B's idea," Party A will immediately light you on fire.
Well, then
maybe we could be different.
Maybe we're just going to be lit on fire by everybody. I don't know. But are
you going to cancel me, Dave?
2020's over. You said at the beginning of this, we were digging a hole and burying it. And you've done throughout the whole podcast is bring 2020 up.
I know. It's because I want to, like, as
I'm going to get my shovel out and beat you to death with it.
This is
then I'm going to bury you in it with 2020.
In the spirit of getting rid of 2020, we're going to exorcise all those demons. I would like to know, are there any other theories? They don't have to be conspiracy theories, because let's be honest, those are just wacky. But are there any other theories that we'd like to bury on this podcast right now?
No.
There's a couple I have that they're actually...
Oh, mercy.
Don't you want to talk about them?
You already...
They're your ideas. I just think it's fun to talk about. Like, for example, here's a theory that we've heard a lot in 2020. And we've heard it before a lot. Reintroduction of the wolves. The reason we don't have elk is wolves. Wolves are smoking all of our elk. Dave, would you like to bury anything in the spirit of 2020?
Here's what I'm going to say about that. I'm hoping that we can get a biologist friend of mine on to have this discussion, because he's done some really fascinating research around predation by large predators on elk calves, mule deer fawns. And I think the results would be rather surprising to listeners. And so I don't want to talk about any of the results right now. But what I do want to say is there's some very interesting data out there about which predators are causing the largest impacts on prey and which types of prey and where.
I love it.
And I'd like to get somebody on that is a pretty renowned expert in this field to have this discussion with us about it.
We may need more biologists, because I have another one.
All right.
Mike, maybe you'll punt it to Dave. I have heard that we got CWD in elk now. Is that accurate?
David?
Didn't we just talk about this?
We did. It's just a primer to the actual question.
We've had CWD in elk.
Because dogs can smell cancer. Doesn't it make sense?
Oh, I don't actually want to do this episode.
Can I throw out the theory?
You can throw out the theory, but I don't want to spend a lot of time with this theory.
Would be to just have a bajillion wolves, and they could smell out the elk that had CWD and deer, for that matter, and just eat them out of the system. Doesn't that make sense?
That's what some people want you to believe.
With lasers.
Would anyone like to bury that theory for 2020? This is your chance.
We'll see if people weigh in. If people weigh in and really want us to have that discussion, we can have that discussion.
All right.
Don't know how interested I am in that discussion.
Anybody got one for me?
No.
Did you know
you're the only one that wants to do this?
Did you know that Theodore Roosevelt actually planted the first Russian olive in America?
Now I don't know whether I can believe you or not, because
that's just not true.
You've just sown all this.
I just made that up.
Stop making things up.
Like I said, why would it care?
All right.
Stop making things up. We want to be as factual as possible on this, and
I know
you don't want to sow seeds of doubt.
You don't want people to believe that you are a Russian bot.
I don't think so. Is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
No, I don't. But I do want to bury some of that stuff, because, hey, it's 2021. This is a great opportunity for us to put it all in the rearview mirror, and then just I don't want to shovel. I just want to use a bulldozer.
So David, what I'm hearing from Nephi is a promise not to pull this stuff anymore. He's going to leave it in 2020. In 2021, he's turning over a new leaf.
Have I brought up the Theodore Roosevelt's conservation love of Russian olives before? No. I'm bringing up in honor of 2020. I don't actually believe it to be true, nor have I ever shared it as if it were facts, except for in this moment.
Mike, finish your thought. I really want you to get this on the record.
Yeah, right. So what I hear, Nephi, you saying is that you're turning over a new leaf, and
I don't think it's fair to say turning over a new leaf, because I'm not sure that...
He doesn't want to let you get this on the record. He just keeps interrupting you.
Well,
you're going to knock it off.
Knock what off?
And then we'll have a tremendous podcast that'll be famous with sponsors and everything.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm going to promise. We're going to be a famous podcast with sponsors and everything as soon as Dave gets around to getting the paperwork done.
There is paperwork to be done on that, isn't there?
Well, I don't want to point fingers at you.
But you have been for a while now.
pretend to say like it's your fault,
even though it's 100% my fault.
But I'm just saying.
You just assume that since I'm a lawyer that I know how to draft an appropriate contract for a sponsor.
Well, let's just say I did it.
What if Mike...
and then gave it to you? Let's just pretend like something like that. Let's just throw a theory out there as if this could happen. Like as if I could have given you a completed contract and you could have said, no. I would like to change a bunch of stuff because I'm an attorney. I'm not saying that did happen, but what if it did?
That happened because what you gave me was total garbage.
Well, I'm no attorney, dude.
All right. Point taken.
All right.
Anyway, so to finish this up, the other things that we're going to bring to you in 2021, there will be significant policy changes. We're going to see policy changes with this new administration.
Yep.
And we're going to be committed to following those and providing updates on, what's going on and why. And we'll do our best to cut through all the stuff you read in the press, and we'll try and get down to the brass tacks and say, okay, what are the likely ramifications, both good and bad, of these decisions that happen. And that's we'll do that as well. Hopefully we can also bring on some, we're doing a lot of this policy stuff, but we have a history also of bringing on some really fun guests, folks that are doing some, like the Lorzera types, right, that are, doing some really cool stuff in the outdoor space, and we'll mix it up a little bit. And we'll also, maybe everybody listening probably knows has way more advice, compelling advice on how to survive in the outdoors than we do. But, perhaps we'll provide some insight there too on some of our outdoor experiences.
Topic for us, but
it's not like that we don't have. We've done some stuff that have
I've been
forced lessons
before.
Yeah, I've done some things that have forced lessons upon me that it would be probably.
I just don't think it's worth teaching anyone. I think we fail at that.
A lot of mine are teaching people what not to do.
No, we talked about this on the podcast that we threw away, but it's been a tough year. Honestly, 2020 has been tough for a lot of people, and believe it or not, as wonderful as some of the outdoor stuff has been, it's been tough for a lot of things. It's been it's been tough to get. It's been tough. Podcasting's been tough. We promise over the next year we're going to try very hard to give you I don't want to
our game.
I don't want to say up our game.
I'm going to say it. Why not?
Improve our, because I feel like we've got great quality, and you should go back and listen to every episode that we've ever done.
But we want every episode to be better than the one that came before it.
Absolutely, and to be better than stuff that we've done, and we're going to do some better episodes.
I think so.
Yeah, and with that, I also want to remind everybody, we do try and tackle multiple sides of an issue, and we try and be honest about it, and we do kind of get into lanes where one guy may approach, it's oftentimes it's guy A's job to attack it from this direction, and guy B will attack it from another direction. Please don't make too many assumptions about where we sit politically, or based on us trying to just like the rest of the culture out there that wants to cancel everybody when they present an idea that you don't like. We're going to try and give you all the sides. We're going to try and make you think about it. But realize that in a lot of what we're doing, we're trying to make you think about it. We're going to provide you somebody else's opinion and ask you to at least consider it and crunch on it a little bit and see if some of it has merit. Because typically, when you run into these difficult issues, they aren't cut and dry. There is something to be discussed and argued over. If that wasn't the case, people wouldn't be doing it.
That's right. And I think you nailed it on the head, Nephi. I mean, we're gonna do our best. We're gonna do our best to bring you a great product every week, and we're gonna present it from all sides. And sometimes Nephi and I might argue, and we might be arguing about something where we actually agree, but we're just arguing because we're trying to set up multiple sides of the argument and play point counterpoint. And
at the end, we usually agree. We usually, for some sick reason, we usually enjoy arguing over a whole lot first.
Sometimes we just yeah, we agree, but we disagree on how to get to the agreement.
Oh yeah, if we got to the same spot on the ground, we'd probably all end up if we were, sitting on the exact same island. But for whatever reason, we have different opinions on how we all got there and what it takes to get off the island and things like that. So it's just interesting.
So welcome everybody to 2021. And the last thing I'll say before I say the last thing before the last thing is this is just the tip of the iceberg. We got 52 episodes to fill. We're gonna try and get back to getting these out to you every week. We've been kind of every other week, for the past couple of months. It's been kind of crazy for all of us, just like it's been crazy for all of you. We're gonna try and get more consistent with getting back to weekly episodes. We're gonna need help though, coming up with the right topics and the right people. If you have people you want to hear from, people you want to hear on this podcast, you want to hear us interview, have a conversation with, let us know. If you have topics you want us to cover, please let us know. We know that there's some of you that have sent in topics that we haven't covered yet. And it's not that we don't want to cover. We're just not smart enough to cover some of these things in a way that would be interesting. We're still working on a couple of them. But there are definitely, we cover a lot of topics that come from you all. So send that stuff in. Send it to our email, yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. Send them directly to us on social media.
Yep. You can find us on what social media platforms?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at the handle @itsyourmountain.
That's right.
We're not on Parler.
I was going to ask you what your handle is on Parler.
Yeah, what's your handle on Parler? If people want to reach out to you.
Just joking.
So we're on those places. Reach out. Send us any feedback, information you've got. Help us make 2021 great. Help us make a great podcast and get out the material that you want to listen to. If we gave you some ideas today and you're like, you know what, I don't really care about any of that stuff that you just said you're going to talk about this year, please let us know. That'd be probably good to know if we're going down the wrong path here. Your feedback is incredibly valuable. We thank all of you for listening to us these past 2.5 years. If you've been with us the whole time, if you're new to the podcast, thanks for joining us on what has been a fun ride for us, and hopefully you enjoy as well. And reach out to us anytime. We love interacting with folks and getting feedback and ideas. Anything else you guys got?
Mike's wrapping up a bunch of chords. I can't figure out why.
No, nothing.
Nope.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Looking forward to a great 2021. And in the meantime, until we talk to you again, remember that life is about experiences. So go have one.